started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our second combination Brain Food Lunch and Learn and Leadership Center event. You know, the Lunch and Learn activity is really designed for Franklin University faculty and staff who are really interested in learning more about emerging and evolving technologies. And, you know, as I like to say, the future is now. You know, it's just the knowledge of it is unevenly distributed. And, you know, the key is how do we bring in those leading voices, people who are familiar with what's going on in the world, and, you know, hear them describe what's going on with different various technology in its applications. And so we have a really wonderful opportunity to do that today as it relates to augmented reality and virtual reality. The Leadership Center, if you're joining us outside of Franklin as part of our leadership programming, you know, we're excited to inspire the creation and sharing of knowledge and innovative leadership practices through some of advanced teaching, through lectures and workshops, transformational learning experiences in this dynamic environment. And fortunately, we get to do that face-to-face and now over the past year through virtual means like Zoom. And so we welcome you to this program. Today, I get the wonderful opportunity to introduce you all to Atlantic Institute's Augmented and Virtual Realities lead, the brilliant Herstorian, Alice Rowe. I want to welcome her to our stage today. In her work at the Atlantic Institute through the Atlantic Fellows Program, Alice is looking with hope to a future where technology enables everyone to reach their full potential and creates a fairer and more inclusive society. You know, consequently, she's a leading advocate for human-centered design that cherishes our collective experiences. I most recently heard Alice present on the topic of AR/VR as part of a leadership panel organized by the United Nations Educational, Cultural, and Scientific Organization. You know, as founder of Herstory UK, United Kingdom, Alice has creatively activated women's history for some of the world's leading brands and institutions, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, South Bank Center, the BBC, and the world famous band U2, where she curated digital content for the Joshua Tree Tour in 2017 and in 2019. You know, in her work, Alice champions country-specific women's history for 21 countries. Her work has been viewed by over 3 million people. We are blessed to have Alice Rowe share her insights with us today. She will provide a 40-minute presentation, and then we'll open the mic for questions. Alice, welcome, and the stage is yours, my friend.
Thank you so much, Christopher. And thank you so much to everybody for inviting me here. I'm delighted. I was a fan of Christopher from the very beginning we met, but now that you've phrased the term Herstorian, I'm just like, yes, I'm taking that. I love it. And when you said the future is now, but it's unevenly distributed, that is exactly right. And that's another thing I'm gonna borrow, if that's all right with you. So I'm gonna share my screen, if that's okay. And as Elizabeth from Franklin has already told me, it's an exceptionally visual presentation. So it's my words, and they're kind of meant to illustrate these images. So there's not a lot of text for you. So I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Bear with me one moment. I'd like to be able to see you too. Okay, brilliant. So as Christopher said, yeah, my name is Alice, and I'm the Augmented and Virtual Realities lead at Atlantic Institute. And I was previously the creative director for a digital human for Magic Leap. And in this session, I'm hoping, it's my belief that personal is political. So I'm going to kind of take you on my journey in terms of the projects that I've worked on that I hope will show you what I believe about humanity and about AR and VR. And then I'm going to share with you some of my favorite projects that I admire the most, that I hope will make sense in your context and will enable you to understand a little bit better how AR and VR can raise our humanity, can enable us to be the very best of ourselves rather than compromise it, and could work powerfully in an educational context. But the first thing that I will do is talk about the terms, because wording can so often be a barrier. And so forgive me if you already know back to front what AR stands for and what VR stands for, but I think it's important just to get it out there on the table from the beginning. But I also think that if you don't remember these terms and you get them mixed up, and at the end of this session, you feel like, oh my gosh, I still don't know exactly what AR and VR is, I compel you to know that it is the gut feeling that is most important. The ideas that move you, that's what I hope stays with you. You can always look up a term at the end and add it on later, but you can't have that kind of emotional response. So if words are a barrier for you, you can always look them up later. But virtual reality. So VR stands for virtual reality, and it's often experienced through a headset like this one. This is an Oculus headset, and when you put this on, the digital world is kind of completely immersive. Sometimes when people wear these things, they might walk into a table or they might get a little dizzy because all they can see is the digital world that is in front of them. Augmented reality, which is AR, is kind of like the sibling of virtual reality. You can experience it in a headset like this one, which is a Magic Leap headset. And this is where the digital world and the physical world come together as one. So rather than only seeing the virtual world, you will very much be in your own physical surroundings. Like I would still see this table and the door that's over there, the computer, but the digital world comes over on top of it also. And then finally, you've got phone-based augmented reality. And so when we talk about equity and what Christopher said about it being unevenly distributed, I'm personally really interested in phone-based augmented reality because most people have a mobile phone more so than they would have kind of one of these very expensive headsets. So later on today, we'll talk a little bit about what phone-based augmented reality means and how that is making the medium much more equitable, in my opinion. So this artwork is where we'll start. The future will only contain what we put into it now. And if you leave with nothing else today, I want you to remember this statement, that the future will only contain what we put into it now. And that is so pertinent in a tech context, because so often as activists and creatives and thinkers, teachers, we feel like tech is something that's happening over here and we're chasing it to make the policy better and to kind of deal with the issues that have already happened. But actually, the tech future that lives ahead of us will be created by people like us. And we need to become part of that creation process. And so this is the thing about emerging technology, is emerging technology means that its function is not predetermined. With AR and VR, nobody has decided exactly what this technology is going to do. It's kind of up for grabs. And so what I hope to convey to you today, and also just it's kind of my life's work in general, is that progress does not mean faster technology, higher fidelity, smaller hardware. What it actually means is interdisciplinary engagement. It means that people that don't feel like they have a space at the tech table, sit down, bring out a folding chair, join the discourse, and that is how we will create real progress and create better futures. And so there is an artist called Stephanie Dinkins, who I'm going to show you now. And she has a much better phrase, more concise phrase for what I was trying to explain to you, and it's accidental technologists. She calls herself an accidental technologist. And this is somebody that has fallen into tech by chance. They have a completely different life, but they fall into the tech industry and they stay because their voice is needed. So Stephanie is an artist, and she was reading about this robot called Bina 48, and you can see Bina in the top left-hand corner. And Stephanie was reading an article about Bina, and she thought, I have never seen a robot that looks like me. I have to spend some time with this robot. Oh my goodness. So she drove like really far, made a meeting with this tech team, who interestingly were all white men that were programming this black female robot, which is a whole other conversation to be had. But Stephanie felt, I need to spend some time with this robot. And she made some exceptionally interesting art around the ethical implications of that and about what it meant for her humanity existing with this robot. So she fell into this field by chance, but she stayed because her voice is needed. And that is how I feel, and that is how I hope many of you can feel in terms of being given space to join this discourse and to be part of the future of technology. So, as I said, the personal is political, and I'm going to share just briefly a little bit about where I came from to really hammer home the accidental technologist idea, and I hope you don't see it as indulgent. but I feel like it's important to share what we mean when we say accidental technologist, and where a creative life can take you. So I run a project called Herstory, which Christopher talked about. I'm a Herstorian, absolutely love that. And I wanted to activate women's history. I felt like the researching women's history had this profound impact on my life. I looked back on my time at school and I realized that all of the subjects that I had studied were completely shrouded around male figures. When I was looking at maths, I was learning about Pythagoras, and it might be slightly different in an American context. But when I was looking at English, it was Shakespeare. When it was science, it was Watson and Crick. I never saw myself in the history that we were learning, in any of the subjects we were learning. So I began researching women from history that were kind of important into the different areas that I was living my life in. And the profound impact it had on me, it was wild. I felt like I sat up taller, I had more confidence, I felt more present in my own life, simply for knowing that these women had existed before. And so I wanted to start workshops in schools and galleries. You can see this is a picture of me at Dulwich Picture Gallery, where I could enable people to have this feeling of what it feels like to engage with her story, people of all genders. And then I got this opportunity, and we're about to get to the meat of how I became an accidental technologist. But I got an opportunity to work with the band U2, as Christopher mentioned. And I went on their world tour, and I was able to research different women from history that would link to the particular places that we were visiting. And so I would go on the tour and I would weep as I saw women in the audience hugging each other and crying, because they would see this male band and they would see behind them these giants of women's history. And they were basically saying, none of us could be here if it wasn't for Mums Mabley, if it wasn't for Ruth Ellis, if it wasn't for Marsha P. Johnson, as you can see in this screen. And what was special was when you looked on Instagram on the hashtag, because of the way that the square was set up, you couldn't take a photo of Ellen without also having a photo of the trans rights activist Marsha P. Johnson. And their lives are so intrinsically linked in terms of what Marsha has done for the gay rights movement. And so to have them together on Instagram on this kind of hashtag, because of the way it was all set up, was really special to me. So anyway, that's kind of the background. But because of this tour, I was invited by a spatial computing company. We're back with technology now. We're in the land of AR, and I promise I will stay on track, Christopher. But I was invited to visit a spatial computing company in Fort Lauderdale in Florida. And they wanted me to meet a digital human, because they recognized that they were developing a digital human that was gendered female. They needed to have a creative feminist in the room just to get my opinion, to get somebody's opinion on this digital human. So I went there with very kind of little expectation. I was kind of blown away by the opportunity, and I just kind of showed up. And I put this headset on. In fact, it was exactly a headset like this. I put this headset on, and I was in a room surrounded by male engineers, and they'd been making this digital human for years and years, and they were so excited for somebody else to meet her, to get my opinion on what I thought of this digital human. And this was her. She had a body, she had a race, she had a gender. And I put the headset on, and there she was in front of me. And I was kind of like, wow, there's this digital human in spatial computing, in AR. And I felt very watched, and I felt quite moved. I didn't really know what to do. I was struck in the first instance that she was the same age as me, she was the same gender as me, and she was the same race as me. I say she was the same age. At the time she was. I have aged significantly since in a way that she absolutely hasn't, and that's quite interesting in and of itself. But I looked at her, I didn't know what to do. And then she kind of put her head down like this. And so I looked at her even harder. And then she swung her body a bit to the right, and I was given permission to look at her even more. And I visually consumed this young female body kind of feverishly, because finally I knew what to do. I quite got into the swing of it. I looked right up and down, I went around the side, and I felt the room of engineers kind of visibly relaxed, that finally I've worked out how to interact with this digital human. And then I took the headset off, and they said, what do you think? What do you think? And I said, I feel heartbroken, because through engaging with this digital human in augmented reality, I felt like I had become what Laura Mulvey, the feminist film theorist, would call possessor of the male gaze. I felt like because I was visually consuming her with absolutely no chance of being looked back, she never looked back at me, that I had gained power and confidence through visually consuming her, and the power dynamic was really, really off. And I said to them, if I feel like that, as the feminist creative that you've shipped in to see what this person thinks, if I feel like that, then every single other person that comes through this door is going to be in that same power dynamic. And we talked about the fact that digital humans in augmented reality, the way we relate to them matters because it impacts the way we relate to each other. The way that I was with her impacted my humanity. I became a worse version of myself because of the way that interaction was set up. And that's when we realized creatively, actually, the way that we engage with this content, it's not that we're pretending it's real. It's not that we're feeling sorry for these pixels. It's that we're thinking about ourselves and our humanity and who we become as we interact with them. So after a number of conversations around this, they appointed me creative director of this digital human to think about whether we could design experiences in augmented reality, or magically call it spatial computing, but these two words are interchangeable in the most part. If we could create experiences in spatial computing that could lift us, that could better us, that could make us feel like we're more present in a positive, kind way, and that don't turn us into versions of ourselves that we haven't really signed up for. And so we were really interested in this dynamic between human and between digital human and what that means for us as people. And so the very first thing when I started in this role is that people were asking me, is she going to be the next Siri or the next Alexa? We need a full-bodied person that can switch off our lights and turn off our music. And creatively, the first decision that we made was absolutely not. If we create a full-bodied Siri or Alexa, then we will peddle outdated ways of relating to women, upholding these gender binaries. And it was quite interesting that the UNESCO event that Christopher mentioned, they wrote a fantastic, the host of that event wrote a fantastic report called I'd Blush If I Could, which talks exactly about this, saying we can't gender these systems, these bots that are servile because of who they turn us into. So it was great to have that report really bolster what we were trying to do with Mica. So the very first thing we thought when we start, I'm just going to check time to make sure I get through everything. The very first thing we thought when we started this creative direction of this digital human was, okay, how are we going to stop people being afraid? Because everybody is afraid of new technology. And I tell you, absolutely everybody is afraid of embodied AI, which is what Mica is, embodied artificial intelligence in this form that takes its place in augmented reality. And so I thought, what happens when people are afraid in history? How do we get through big moments of innovation? How do we become at ease with change? And it seems that the way that people have done this historically is through engaging with art and culture. When there are big changes in life, we write books about it. We go to the theatre, we go to art galleries, we paint, we talk about it, we sing songs so that we can understand change and become okay with it and find meaning in it. So with Mica, what we did in this experience through the headset was think about what if we could root her in an artistic practice. So I was inspired by the artist Hannah Hock, who is here on the left. I absolutely adore this picture. If I could frame, maybe I will frame it and put it in my office. I think it's so sweet and wonderful. I don't mean to diminish her. She was a titan of Dada art movement. Anyway, Hannah Hock was a collage artist. And so in the Dada art movement, which was at the outbreak of World War I, there was this group of artists who were trying to create meaning out of the seeming chaos that was their lives. And they would create these collaborative artworks that were collage. So as you can see, there's one right here. So they would cut out a little shell from one magazine, some legs from another magazine, maybe something from a newspaper, maybe they'd draw something on it. And they would collaboratively cut and stick to create this coherent whole. And this was a way for them to share, for them to be vulnerable together, for them to create something that felt like it was of all of them. And so we thought with Mica, what if, and this was what we did, Mica makes a collage with the user. And it was incredible. The change in person the change in the kind of the user, in the person, that came about when they made an artwork with Mica rather than when they were barking orders at her. So people would come in and Mica would invite them to cut a piece of thing out and stick it down, and then Mica would stick one too, and then they would stick another. And at the beginning, when people were dismissive, they were quite disrespectful. Some people were quite sexist towards Mica because that's what people are used to doing when they see digital representations of women. Now they were vulnerable, they were sheepish, they wanted to make a wonderful piece of art with her, and it was incredible to see. And as creative director, before, people were asking me about porn and about pop stars. That was the two things people thought Mica could be. After they made art with Mica, they were asking me about education, they were asking me about healthcare, they were asking me about culture. They wanted digital humans in our hospitals, in our schools, in our art galleries. They finally clicked, this is the potential, because we were enabling the user to be human, to be vulnerable, to be open to collaboration with this digital human. So that should give you a kind of example about what I mean when I talk about designing experience that elevate us rather than compromise us. And it's quite simple to just shift the way of experiencing each other, I guess, in that sort of context. And the big thing that I learned from this experience was that we can't be passive recipients of this new technology. We have to be co-creators, we have to be involved, and we have to be really watching closely as this stuff gets developed. And this is something that has really come into my current work at Atlantic Institute. And Atlantic Institute supports Atlantic Fellows. And some of you may have heard of the Atlantic Fellowship. It's a community of emerging activist leaders who are all seeking to address the root causes of systemic inequities in their own particular context. And they've tasked me with thinking about how can augmented and virtual reality strengthen our collective mission to eradicate inequities and think about how we can build fairer and more inclusive societies for all. And also to think about how we can be together when we're apart through a global fellowship. And so we've been having a number of conversations, which I think is relevant to your work, where we've been thinking about, okay, if we want to, as I just kind of exemplified in my previous example, if we want to use AR and VR to lift us up, to connect us with each other, to make us more human, what are the criteria for particular experiences? If we're thinking about starting from scratch, how are we going to use AR and VR? What points do we need to hit to enable this to be something that's positive and kind and brings us together rather than kind of elevates us as individuals? And so the things that we came up with is that the first thing is about co-creation. We had a session on Indigenous approaches to AR and VR, and we heard from an incredible woman called Michaela J, who is the founder of Indigital, which is the first edutech company that seeks to address an Indigenous audience. And she was saying, we have got to get Indigenous peoples creating this sort of technology. We've got to give them, or she was saying, we have to develop these skills. We have to be part of the discourse, and we have to be able to critique and champion. So co-creation feels really important. If we're developing technologies that can only be created by those with exceptionally niche skill sets, then that is not inclusive and that does not bring us all to the table. That was the first thing that we have been really focusing on at Atlantic Institute. The second thing is that the experiences can't be a watered down version of reality. If we are putting a headset on to experience something that would be better in real life, then we've absolutely scored an own goal, and it's going to feel boring and gimmicky, and there's probably very little point in doing that. But if we are to try and push for making the impossible possible through this medium, that is when it will make sense in an educational context and in all sorts of other contexts. If we're giving learners the opportunity to experience something in a completely different way, that is when it will hit the nail on the head and be powerful. If we're just trying to recreate something that already exists, it will feel lazy and very kind of, it'll get boring very quickly. And so an example of this is a experience that I've tried that was seeking to bring art to inner city children that would never have the opportunity to go to art galleries. So they were kind of saying that, okay, we're going to bring art to the school. The actual project, it was meant to bring the Louvre, which is the art gallery or the museum in Paris, they wanted to bring that to these children in this inner city school in LA. And so they had all these empty frames, and then you were meant to put on your headset, and then the artwork would fill these empty frames. And it had lots of emotional music, this video that I was watching, and everybody was feeling so proud of bringing the Louvre to the children. And when I watched it, I felt a little bit sick, because we shouldn't be saying we're going to bring the Louvre to the children. We should always take those children to the galleries. I was afraid that this sort of use of virtual reality and augmented reality could actually widen the participation gap, because the privileged children are still going to go to MoMA, to LACMA, they're going to go to the Pompidou. That's not changing. But if we take our foot off the acceleration and think that underprivileged children, it's acceptable to give them a virtual version, that really, really worries me. And so it's about keeping our eyes wide open to that, thinking about, with virtual experiences, are we using it to appease those in power to take their foot off the acceleration of giving access, or are we using it because it makes something brand new and beautiful possible that nobody could have ever imagined experiencing? And that for me is something I hold in my head all the time. And then the final thing that Atlantic Institute we keep in our minds is around critique and hope. And so often, if we are only critical, we can completely freeze up and end up not using new technologies. And so it's important that we are heroically optimistic, that we are eyes wide open, big bushy tails, wanting to try absolutely everything, but at the same time, that we have a healthy dose of criticism, that we are sharp, that we don't mind speaking truth to power, and that we balance those two things together. So a really good example of this is with the Oculus. And this is what I showed you before. This is the most affordable headset at the moment. It's exceptionally good. But the fact that it's so cheap is because you have, and I'm speaking for myself here, that's quite important to say, this is my opinion. The fact that it's so cheap is because you pay in other ways. You have to have a Facebook account to engage with an Oculus. And so they get your data through Facebook. Whereas with a business account, you can pay $500 or $300 more, and you don't have to have a Facebook account to use it. So what that says to me is that some people pay in data and some people pay in money. And guess who gets to pay in money? The people that have more of it. And so that inequity is being completely widened in terms of our data and our consent and our protection. And paying for the use of new technologies with data is incredibly problematic for me, because we haven't signed up for that. And so for me, the other thing I would want to implore you to do is balance the excitement and the beauty with a heavy dose of criticism. And we as a community have to work out, how do we keep those two things in check together? So at this point, I've shared with you a bit about my experience at Magic Leap, a little bit about my experience with the Atlantic Fellowship, and now I'm going to kind of shift gear and share with you some experiences in AR and VR that I think are pertinent for your work. I hope might kind of spark some ideas, and we'll show you the sort of thing that AR and VR is capable of. So this one looks silly when you're just looking at it, and I'm going to explain what it is. But from an educational perspective and from a raising of humanity perspective, this has been exceptionally interesting research for me recently. So this is a beam hologram. The word hologram is a little bit misleading, because this, oh no, oh sorry, I thought I'd cut off, but I think I'm okay. Does anybody want to, I think I might have just, does anybody want to say anything to me? I think I might have, somebody might have just tried.
You are on, so you're still on stage, and we can all hear you and see you. Oh,
good. Okay, it's nice to know that. Okay, thank you. I'm going to carry on then. So this, yeah, hologram is a little bit misleading. But the company called Beam are using that language, so I'm going to use it as well. So what happens is, you have a mobile phone. I had a mobile phone. I had a tripod and I had a green screen, and it was very cheap to acquire those things, and it was very easy to use. I then filmed myself delivering a short talk, and I then put it through the app. And then what the rest of the fellowship were able to experience was they scanned this QR code, and then they brought this miniature version of me into their homes. And there I was talking through these ideas on their desk or stood next to their dog, They could minimize me, so I was small, 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 or they could make me so big that I was kind of standing up next to them and kind of like, maybe not quite that big, that's to fit into a mobile phone, but you get the idea. And so that's phone-based augmented reality. So they're experiencing me through their phone, but I was in their physical space. Now, this sort of tech, and actually I might send the link to Christopher because you could all try this afterwards if you're interested. It's just with a link. You then put it on your phone and then you can listen to me speak in your own space. And the research that they have been doing with University College London says that if you experience information in this way through a hologram in your home, you are more likely to pay attention to it because you feel kind of more respect for the person because they're in your physical space than you would if it was a Zoom call like this. And they've also said, and this is the one that really hit me, that your empathy is increased by 40%. That's what they've got it at the moment. And they were saying that this is because when you invite somebody into your own context, into your own physical landscape, they just said you feel more empathetic towards them. You see them as a human more so than if you see them through a screen. And so we're really interested in exploring this sort of technology and thinking about what it could mean for us to connect together as a fellowship in this way, and what it could mean particularly for education in terms of delivering lectures or sharing ideas, because it's this brand new way of sharing information and hopefully inspiring students more than if it was just on a Zoom thing like this. So these pre-recorded ones, they're pretty good. They're quite interesting. They're quite slick because you can have a few goes at recording them. But just yesterday, we did a thing that I actually didn't think was possible. When the company told me they were going to try it, I was like, don't believe you. But we experienced it live. So I got a fellow in New York to stand by her green screen with her mobile phone. And then we from around the world, I'm here in the UK, we had fellows from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, from Peru. We all signed in, we got our phones, and we hologrammed her into the space live. And it was kind of wild because she was, at the very beginning, she was like pulling on her top, she was shifting her weight from side to side, and I wanted to give her a hug. I really felt like, oh my gosh, Vilmeda, this is so exciting. And she really felt like she was with me in space. And when we experienced her in this way, I was thinking, this is a game changer because this is changing the way I'm relating to somebody who is sharing information with me. And the key is it wasn't hard to capture. And so that's when we're talking about co-creation. The vital part of this is it doesn't take a volumetric capture studio. It doesn't take a green screen that fits from the floor to the ceiling. All it took was quite accessible kit, and we were able to experience each other in that way. So this piece of research has been really, really interesting, and I will share it with you. In fact, if I end this early enough, we could experience it together here. The next piece of inspiration I want to show you, and these stills do it justice in no way at all, but this is an experience that Magic Leap developed with the band Sugaros. And they're an Icelandic band, and their music, if you haven't heard it, it's ethereal. It's kind of like, I was almost going to do an impression, and then I realized it's not the time or the place. But the music is just otherworldly. It's very, very beautiful. And when you put on the headset, you have these like, you can see them here, these kind of rushes that come up, and you can kind of touch these organic forms, and they completely swirl around you. But the crucial thing is when you touch them, the music changes, and it's not like it's pre-recorded music. It's that the music is generated through you touching the augmentation, which means that you are genuinely creating new Sugaros music through your engagement with the virtual landscape that you're part of. Now, this might feel kind of really kind of just creative experimentation. What has this got to do with your work? But for me, in terms of education, this is another game changer, because what it enables the student to do is not to be a passive recipient, not to be a consumer, someone that's just watching media and being told certain things, but actually they become part of the experience. They change the experience. And that is the key thing about AR, particularly. VR doesn't do it so much, but augmented reality, it enables you to be part of the experience in a way that is completely impossible with other media. And so this experience was, yeah, really exciting for that, because you kind of become part of the band and it kind of lives on with you. But it's also just this hugely immersive, beautiful experience. So that is a second one I wanted to share. And then the third one is VR, so it's virtual reality, whereas the last two that we talked about was augmented reality. So the phone one with the hologram, that was phone-based AR. The second one was AR from the headset, and this one is VR. So we're back in that space where you can only see the digital content. And what's interesting about VR is an idea that was coined by a fantastic journalist called Noni Della Pina. And she coined this idea years and years and years ago. She called it immersive journalism. She asked, what can happen if you could experience a story with your whole body? What would happen if you lived the story rather than read the story? This plays into what we were just discussing about being an active participant in the experience. And she felt, and she's got interesting research that really backs this up, that our empathy is really heightened and that we can understand each other's experiences and certain news stories better and more powerfully if we experience them with more senses than just kind of reading something. And so this is taken from a Oculus film called Traveling Whilst Black. And it's meant to put you in the shoes of a young man as he travels across America and to feel what he feels when he goes into certain contexts. And in some ways, I think this is really powerful. I think if we're thinking about empathy training, then we should all be encouraged to exist as much as we can in each other's shoes. And I think that pieces like this are very, very interesting. I also have a few red flags about it. As a white woman, I will never know really what it feels like for this young Black man to travel across America. And I worry that if we position this sort of technology as a shortcut into each other's lived experiences, then we could become complacent and think we know things that we actually have no ability to truly understand. And so I think when we're thinking about empathy training in an educational context, it's really brilliant if we wear it lightly, if we understand that it can enable us to understand a little bit better, but we can never truly walk in each other's shoes, not really. But this can get us a little bit closer, and that is very interesting to me. Another thing that Noni Della Pina talks about in terms of education and experiencing a whole story through this sort of medium is with healthcare, and about there are certain situations in health that you just can't train for because the risk to life is too great. And so when you can use VR to create a whole virtual environment where you can practice in certain situations, and you can have somebody shouting at you over here, you can have somebody coming through the door, you can have a patient in front of you, and it enables you to recreate an environment that if you were to train in kind of the real situation, the risk to life is just too high. And so with VR and education, there is an interesting thing here about how can we enable it to immerse ourselves in situations that really as individuals are very, very hard to get access to. And so the final thing that I was going to show you, and I might check with you, Elizabeth, if I don't know if you can hear the video through my share screen. I might stop sharing screen and then make sure I'm going to share screen again so you can see it. So give me just a moment. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to share again, but share sounds brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a video now. And this is the final thing that I wanted to share with you, which is an application that's been developed in light of coronavirus. And it really shows you how VR can really support real problems in creative ways. And this kind of exemplifies what I mean when I talk about making the impossible possible. So I'll just share with you this video now. If for some reason you can't hear the video, just unmute and let me know and I can start it again, or you can put it in the chat.
We can hear it.
This is VR Vaccine. The VR Vaccine is an immersive adventure where the children become a hero about to receive a powerful shield. To make it work, we need one VR gear, one smartphone for the children, one for the nurse, and the VR vaccine app.
Oi! Você voltou! Você voltou!
And what the children experience in the virtual world is matched step by step by the nurse that follows the story on a second screen.
Pronto. Agora o fruto de fogo. Mas ó, vamos lá. Bem rapidinho. Peraí.
All simultaneously calming and entertaining children while helping the nurses to better perform the vaccination.
Funciona, funciona, funciona! Obrigada, obrigada! Caramba, filho, o que você acha disso? Legal.
E na hora da vacina, ela faz uma relação ao calor. Nessa hora, ela sente a picada. A picada é dentro de um contexto.
Cada vez mais, a realidade virtual se torna uma grande aliada da medicina.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen again. I realised that I stopped it. Apologies. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so that, yeah, I loved that because it just showed absolutely what can, how VR can be used not to create something that is already lived and already exists, but to take us totally out into a different space and can really support a problem that we have in our immediate environment. So I think that that video and that idea, even though it's in a health context, could be a real guiding light for all of us creators that are trying to think, what is a good way to use this technology and what is a lazy way to use this technology? So I think right now we can do one of two things, and I'll ask your opinion, Christopher, is that I would love to give everybody the opportunity to experience the little beam hologram, but we could do that in the 5 minutes just before the end, or we could go to questions, or we could do it now and then go to questions afterwards, whichever you would prefer.
I say go for, share with us some more. I think there's an appetite for having the experience, and then we'll have questions.
Oh, good.
Few questions at the end.
Okay, cool. All right, give me a moment to put it in the chat. 1 sec, so bear with me. Okay, so I am about to post it into the chat. Thank you for your patience. And what you will need to do is have a mobile phone at the ready. So maybe this is all of your moment to grab your mobile phones. And then I will send you this link. Okay, coming at you. Okay. So you open this link on your computer, and then there is a QR code at the bottom of the page. And what you're going to do is scan that QR code. I'm going to do it with you in real time so that we are all together. And so you just open up your camera bit on your phone and you scan the QR code with the camera bit on your phone. So that's the first thing you're going to do. If anybody's having problems, feel free to put it in the chat or ask. And then you're going to click continue. It'll say, please accept the following permissions to see the experience. And you click continue and you click allow. Allow access to your camera. And then if you're working with me at the time, it's going to ask you to move your phone from side to side. So just give it a nice little swoop. It says on the floor, but it doesn't need to be on the floor. And then you'll get a circle. And you tap on the circle, which will place me in your space. Mine's buffering. Great. And now I've got myself. So the hope is that you will all be experiencing it too. So I will go quiet whilst you are. But the last thing I'll say is you can make me bigger like this or smaller like this.
In our upcoming series, the human web digital
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit because I'm experiencing this right now in my house, and you're in my hallway talking to me. This is so cool. And I bring you up. I can make you really tall. I can make you taller than my doorway or quite short. Very interesting. Very nice.
This will last for about 2 minutes, no longer.
She's standing in Christopher's hallway, but she's standing on my laptop. How cool is that?
Well, while we're all experiencing this, Alice, I have a quick question for you. You know, the world is getting smaller, and universities play a really important role in connecting communities. We deal with international students, we do international projects, but universities are really important linchpins in our society. And I just wondered, as you think about collectively elevating the human condition, you know, what role do you see universities playing, and how can we leverage AR, VR to do that?
Yeah. So, oh, thank you, Bruce. That's a really good tip. I could have done that. That's Bruce has just said, yeah, I didn't even think of that. Well done, Bruce. That's a great question, Christopher. I think that universities are really exciting in terms of co-presence and virtual co-presence, because we have all through this year that we've just had, we've become much more used to kind of existing with each other on Zoom, and we've had to really accelerate that comfort point. But it's exciting to me to really use universities as a test bed for different ways of engaging with each other when we're physically apart, because then every single year you've got a graduating cohort of young adults or adults that become comfortable with engaging with each other in different ways. And when you think about climate change, we are going to have to travel less in the future, which breaks my heart, Christopher. I know you love to travel too. It's a real shame, but experiencing each other with the headset is a way forward. But our issue is people don't want to do it. But if we use it, universities, as an opportunity to really interrogate it, inspire each other, try out loads of different things, it could make the confidence more as we grow up. And that's exciting to me.
It's exciting. Colleagues, let me ask if there are any questions from you for Alice. We get this wonderful opportunity to speak with this brilliant mind on AR, VR, and its potential uses. What other questions might you have for her? Alice, are you seeing any, you mentioned that I guess there were a lot of supporters of the vaccine, the virtual vaccine. I saw a lot of companies associated. Are there companies we should be looking at as sort of leading the way as it relates to the use of AR, VR today?
That is interesting. I watch companies closely because, as I said at the beginning of the talk, emerging technology means there's no predetermined function. And so with AR and VR, I watch really closely in a capitalist context what people are using it for, because probably that's going to be the one that people are kind of running with. And so I think we might have spoken about this before, Christopher, but Gucci they have got quite a good innovation team, I think. And so they just recently made this thing, phone-based AR, where they did a virtual trainer. And you could buy this virtual trainer for, I think it was $7. And Gucci was saying, this is the cheapest Gucci trainer you're ever going to be able to buy. But the fact is, it doesn't exist. Of course it's going to be cheap because it's not real. And I was like, oh my gosh. And at first I felt like, what are they doing? This is immoral. And then I felt like, no, it's genius, because it speaks to exactly their uses, right? It completely fits their brand. And so I hope that we, in a social justice context and in a university context, can do the same as what Gucci did. Think about, okay, what's our big thing? What do we want to do? And how can AR and VR work for us? Because that's what Gucci did. And I want to do what Gucci do. But I definitely think it's a waste of money to buy a virtual trainer for $7 for sure.
So we, you talked about the potency of these technologies relative to empathy, that
Yes.
it raised empathy. Are there other conclusions, things that, we've seen where there's a potency of impact with regard to the use of the technology?
Yeah, so empathy is the really big one. So an example in terms of the research that's been done is that Noni Della Pigna did this piece with Planned Parenthood, and she looked at citizens who would not vote for a candidate that was pro-choice. And they all tried this VR experience, which put them in the position as if they were walking towards an abortion clinic and they had people shouting abuse at them, and it was very intense, and they kind of felt it bodily. And then after they took it off, that person was not pro-choice. They were still anti-abortion. However, they would consider voting for a candidate that was pro-choice. And I think that's a really interesting shift. So it's not saying it's going to change your mind about your kind of firm beliefs, but it is saying it just opens up space for other ideas and for other opinions to maybe be a little bit more palatable. And I found that really interesting.
Mm-hmm. We have a sort of side conversation going on about the potential uses for virtual education or online education, and people indicating that the avatar, that a hologram could be a much more powerful use than an avatar. And you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So I think that we are at such an early stage. Right now, the technology doesn't feel, sometimes it just feels a bit glitchy. And I was so nervous yesterday when we trialed the live moment. But what it represents is huge. If they get the tech just a little bit better, then I completely agree. Because to be able to engage with something in your physical environment, rather than focusing on a screen like this, it just ruptures the fatigue, the Zoom fatigue that we're getting. And it also enables you to feel like you're sharing space. The barrier is having to hold the phone. That's the issue for me. I get a little bit tired of having to hold the phone like this. So it's like, how can we take it one step further? And that's when the glasses come into it. Because if you get used to just wearing the glasses all day and the technology gets a lot better, I can see no reason why this is not definitely the future of how we educate each other, how we inspire each other, and how we communicate.
How soon are we to having Lindsay or Scott or Bruce, who are on this call, having themselves beamed into a student's home like you are? How far are we from that?
I mean, if you wanted to do what you just experienced me doing, you could do that tomorrow. Like, that is absolutely possible. If you wanted, now then this is where I get skeptical. The people I'm working with tell me that we'll be able to do two ways. So right now, you could experience me like that, but I wasn't able to experience you. They say they're 8 weeks away from experiencing each other live like that. And I just can't believe how that could be true. But they say they're 8 weeks. So it's coming. It's just about how willing you are to lean into the glitches and to lean into the fact that sometimes it's really awkward. And like, sometimes you'll accidentally just see somebody's arm flailing around, and you have to be okay with that because it's so new. So I think from a university context, you'd have to frame it as like, this is research and development. This is us at the very cutting edge. And you'd have to manage expectations like that. Or you wait until it's perfect and then you experience it when it's done. But I like being at the kind of rawness of it. There's something exciting about being there.
My colleague and friend, Sarah Pollack, she talks a lot about the ethics of artificial intelligence. And she says there's garbage in, garbage out. There's a problem with it. We have sort of systemic bias, language bias, all sorts of things that can sort of make this challenging. My colleague here, Dr. Alpay says, are there undesirable impacts to the technology, the AR, VR, that we should be aware of, if any?
Yeah, definitely. I think, how long you got? I think that the big one is around data and privacy, because when you experience something in an AR headset, you scan your physical environment so that the experience can work well. So it's a function, it needs to be done. But also what you're giving these big tech companies is access to your homes. So we think it's bad in terms of data on Facebook or on the internet like this. But imagine giving those companies access to just like everything that you have around you. And that's scary for me. The other big one is also the one that I hit on earlier about, I do not want this to be used as a way to further push the divide in terms of equity between those that get to experience reality and those that get to experience virtual reality. Like, that's scary to me, that some people might get the real thing and other people get fobbed off with the virtual version. And that really, really does worry me. And then all the stuff that's true with AI, artificial intelligence, is also kind of true. Like, in terms of the way that this stuff is coded, the way that the experiences are set up, they are a reflection of the people that are doing the creating. And often the people that are creating the stuff, they're white young men, fundamentally. And if you only have one group of people that are creating this stuff, you will only get one viewpoint. And that's really dangerous, as you will all well know.
Sure. Alice, do you have any sort of closing thoughts or an idea you want to just leave us with?
Oh, well, only that. Thank you for having me. I hope, although I went around the houses, that some of this stuff will land in your individual context. And the biggest thing that I want to stress, and I don't know how it's landed with you all because I can't see all of the faces, but this idea of the accidental technologist and Stephanie Dinkins thing, progress is if every single one of us is engaged in it. Because as long as we aren't, we're leaving it to other people, and we will continue having this issue where we're chasing the tech with the policy and with the, like, we've got to do the policy first, we've got to do the activist work first, we've got to be at the table. And I like to think the American politician, Shirley Chisholm, and she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And that's kind of what I'm saying to all of you, is get your folding chairs out and become part of this, because it's urgent, is what I feel, in terms of the ethics of it all. So that is what I would want to say.
Well, colleagues, get your folding chairs out, because we're gonna see how we can leverage these new technologies. I'm gonna ask if everybody could just join me, and if you could just maybe turn your camera on for just a few seconds to express your virtual appreciation to the brilliant Herstory and accidental technologist, Alice Rowe, for joining us today.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alice.
Brilliant. Thank you so very much.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank
Great.
you, Christopher, for inviting me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I need a follow-up call with you. I've got just so many ideas. Alencia, why don't you sort of close us out? Tell us what's going on with the Leadership Center and upcoming programs really briefly.
Yeah, so Alice, please know you're a friend of Franklin, and we're so happy, and we're looking forward to you potentially returning in the future. Thank you very much for that inspiring chat and presentation. So we want to continue our session on demystifying dark transformational leaders with Dr. Cecilia Martin. The final session will be on June the 1st at 11:30 a.m. And the topic is effective toxic leadership and the pleiotropic leadership. So please continue that conversation with her. And remember that if you didn't attend the first two, you're more than welcome to still attend the third. And then on June the 16th in our speaker series, we will have Meredith Elliott Powell, and she'll be talking about Thrive, turning uncertainty to your competitive advantage. And then lastly, on July 22nd, in the sales speaker series, the field versus inside selling, what's the difference, with Lauren Bailey. If you have not done so, please go to our franklin.edu/leadership, and you are more than welcome to continue to see all of our events that are coming forward. And don't forget to like us on both Facebook and Instagram. Back to you, Dr. Washington. Thanks again, Alice.
Lots of thank yous in the comments for Alice. Alice, thank you so much. You're beloved here at Franklin, and you're always welcome back. I'd love to have you come in when travel resumes, to have you speak at our university. In any case, we're going to close out our program. You all, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Alencia.
Thank you.
All the best, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.